Welcome back, everyone. Today we're going to talk about the FED-2, so make sure you stick around. Hey everyone, so like I said, today we're going to talk about the FED-2, which is a Soviet camera that was created at the FED factory in Soviet Ukraine, and it was produced in response to the Leica II that was being produced in Germany. It's actually got a pretty interesting history, or I should say the FED factory has an interesting history. FED is actually FED for the initials of, let's see if I could get this name, Felix E. Dzerzhinsky. And what's interesting about him is that he helped to create the secret police in the Soviet Union, and he also was one of the architects of the Red Terror, which was during the Russian Civil War. You can look that up if you want to see the details of that. But so the FED factory is named after him, and it started out as an orphanage, and supposedly there were orphans who worked there. I don't know all the details to that. I will leave a link to Mike Eckman's website down below because he has the history of the FED factory and of the FED-2, so you can get more information on that there. But speaking of Mike Eckman, he is the one who sent me this camera. He was nice enough to send me a couple cameras like he always does, and this one is a rangefinder, and he wanted me to try out a Soviet rangefinder. What better way to do that than a FED-2? So let's talk about the features of the camera first. The camera was produced in 1955 up until 1970, like I said, at the FED factory, and it was usually paired with the Industar 26-meter lens here that you see here, which is equivalent to a 50mm lens, maybe a little bit shorter than a 50mm lens, I believe. I'm not sure. It's an f2.8 lens, so it's pretty nice. It's a nice lens, and the factory usually paired the FED-2 with this lens, so it was a nice setup you could get in Soviet Ukraine at the time. The Industar lens allows you to focus up to 1 meter, which is about a little more than 3 feet, up to infinity. It's an M39 lens mount, and the thread is a little bit different than a Leica thread mount, and also the cam inside, when you take the lens off, there's a cam hanging down. On a Leica, it's round. On a Soviet FED, it is more like a hook, I think, and so that makes it a little bit harder to pair a Leica thread mount lens to a FED camera, so you'd have to be aware of that. And then you have the frame advance lever on top, which also serves as your film reminder, and also your frame counter is underneath there, and that is a manual frame counter, so you have to turn it back manually when you're done with your roll of film, or when you load a new roll of film. And also, when you advance to the next frame, it also cocks the shutter. And because of that, you have to be careful with it. You don't want to change the shutter speed before you advance the frame. It ruins the tensioning, so you want to make sure you're cautious about that. So try to make it a habit after you take a picture to advance to the next frame before you change the shutter speed. On this copy of the FED-2, the shutter speeds are 1/25th up until 1/500th, and also B for bulb, and later variations have 1/30th of a second up till 1/500th. It's also recommended that when you want to get to bulb, you don't go from 500 to bulb. You want to go all the way back through the shutter speeds to the B. So it is a little temperamental. You want to be careful with those things. So like the Nikon F, around the shutter release button is a collar that you would turn to release your film so that you could rewind it, and then back when you want to take pictures. And then over here is the film rewind knob that you can lift up. And also around the film rewind knob is this lever that allows you to change the focusing inside of your viewfinder, which is pretty cool. The viewfinder, in my opinion, is pretty small. I've been trying to train myself to use my right eye to focus with this camera, because normally I use my left. and it's just easier to use your right with these cameras. But the viewfinder is pretty small. It's a small round hole. I'm not sure if the Leica has that. I have never used a Leica II, so I'm not going to compare the two models because I don't have experience with the Leica, but that would probably be my only gripe with this camera, is how small the viewfinder is with my glasses. So I had a pretty hard time, sometimes seeing with it. But the rangefinder itself, the rangefinder patch, is very clear. I enjoyed using that. I've had other rangefinders where I could barely see the rangefinder patch and it was a pain to focus. So that's one thing it's got going for it as well. On the front you have your self-timer. I think this might have come on later versions as well. So this camera was, like I said, was made from 1955 to 1970, and over that course there were several variations, tiny changes in different things. Like I mentioned, the shutter speed change, the self-timer change, there were several variations, and collectors of Soviet cameras usually have one of each of those changes. Also, like the Nikon F, the back of the camera comes off, except this one has two locks, the Nikon F has one, but just like the Nikon F, the back of the camera slides off. I'm not sure if the Leica II does that, or if the Leica II is bottom loading, but if you prefer this way over bottom loading, then this is a good alternative as well. It's not hard to load the film with this. Over time though, the take-up spool does become stuck in here, and it's harder to remove it in order to start to advance your film if you want to do it that way. I had no problems or issues loading my film though. And then you just lock both locks. It's got a cold shoe up here, so if you want to mount a different viewfinder for different focal lengths, if you want to put a different focal length lens on here, you can. I should take this back off. Let me take this back off because I forgot something here. There are two screws under here as well that you can adjust to adjust your shutter speeds. I wouldn't touch that, but there is a way to adjust them. If your shutter speeds start to slow down, you can adjust those shutter speeds using those screws, which I thought was interesting. There is also a PC socket for flash connection up here, and I think the electronic flash synchronization is 1/25th on this camera. On other cameras it's 1/30th. So those are all the features of the camera. It is simple, just like when I reviewed the Zenit B. It's a simple camera, but it has everything you need and nothing you don't. It is really nice to hold. It feels really sturdy. It doesn't feel cheap. It doesn't feel like it's going to fall apart or break in your hands. And even though there are some cautions you have to take with the shutter, which are usually common with mechanical cameras that work this way, it's not a delicate camera by any means. It feels rugged, it feels heavy and well made, and I love the look of it. And even the covering here, I'm not sure if it's the same thing that's on a Leica. It feels rougher than what's on a Leica, and it feels like it's really glued on there, whereas the covering on my Leica is kind of coming off. So I think even that's a little more sturdier. So while this is an impersonation, I call it, of a Leica II, it's like a rough and ready version of a Leica II. The other thing I like about this camera is the sound of the shutter. Let me see if I could have you hear it. I don't know why, I just love the sound of that shutter. It's not as light as a Leica, but it's still pretty soft. I like that sound. It's easy to get to the shutter button, and there's a throw on the lens, so it's easy to focus, and it's small, so you can put it in your pocket, which I really liked. I had it in my pocket when I'd go for walks with my fiance. So let's go over some photos I took with it. So here's one taken on Ilford HP-5400 on one of those walks that I took, and it's of a neighbor's house with the palm trees and everything. Right away I loved the feel of the camera in my hands, and it felt very natural to take pictures with it. It didn't feel overly complicated like some cameras can be. Here's a stop sign in the neighborhood, and I remember trying to take this picture. It was a little bit difficult for me to see through the viewfinder, like I said, because it's small and my glasses, but I was surprised that it was a nice composition. Let's see, so the next picture is tree. It's pretty sharp, the lens. I'm not sure if it's as sharp as the Industar 50mm lens that I have on my Zenit B. I felt like that one was a little bit sharper, but this lens is good on its own, has its own merits. You can see these pictures are pretty sharp. Here's a picture of a children at play sign. I liked the look of these weeds coming up out of my driveway. I wanted to see how it looked at a close focus, so I was pretty close to the driveway with this shot, and it still came out pretty good. So you can see this photo of Frankie here in my house. This was Ilford Delta 400 pushed to 1600 because I was taking photos indoors. And you can see, because it was wide open, the lens, that there's some nice blurring of the background. So this lens has really nice bokeh, or whatever you call that, bokeh on it, and blurring of the foreground as well. So even at 2.8, it's not like 1.4 or anything like that, but even at 2.8, it's got really nice blurring of the background, so it's good for portraits, like this portrait of Frankie. And I was able to take pictures indoors, so that was nice. And this picture of my avocado tree, again, took it like a portrait. The background's blurred, and everything came nice and sharp. So all in all, it's a really good camera, I think, especially for it being a camera that was trying to impersonate a Leica. You know, a lot of people would say it's hard to live up to a Leica. I'm not going to argue with that. I've never owned a Leica II, as I said, so I'm not going to even speak about that. But for this camera, for a FED-2, it is really nice. I would very highly recommend it if you can't afford a Leica. I'm pretty sure that on eBay right now they're running like 600 and up, a Leica II. Don't quote me on that. I don't know. As of now, when I last looked, it was a Leica II was like $600, whereas a FED-2 on eBay runs you significantly less, maybe $30. Even if you do have a Leica, this might be nice for your collection. I'm thinking about probably getting one of these. Thanks, Mike. You've done it again. But I'm probably going to get one. I mean, it's really nice. I love these old mechanical cameras. You can't beat them. And this is a good one. I think this should be on anybody's list of Soviet cameras, and from what Mike says, it usually is in people's top 5 when you ask them what their favorite Soviet cameras are. But yeah, that's it for the FED-2. I highly recommend it, and the next video will probably be about the Kiev that Mike lent me, and be sure to hit the subscribe button so that you don't miss that one and all the videos I have to come. And if you enjoyed this video, please hit that thumbs up button. All of these things help me out. Commenting, liking, subscribing, all of these things really help me out. They make me feel like it's worth it, worth making these videos for you guys, because I know that you're watching and I know that you like what I'm putting out there. So I appreciate everybody who has subscribed and who always comments. I see all you guys. I see you guys who are regulars here, and I look forward to your comments. And until next time, stay motivated and keep shooting.